Hello, everyone. This is our week 3 article presentation. I'm Adam Laycock. June 1 was also here, but he is feeling unwell right now, so he wasn't feeling up to presenting. Um, our articles are covering the biology of anthropology, how it relates between humans and apes. Um, the first article we are going to cover is God Culture by Craig Stanford. In this article, Craig Stanford goes over how culture, as it relates to humans, is made up of thousands of small differences and traditions. Um, and, you know, it's all these sorts of strange little things. Um, and he especially focused on one experience he had, where in Tanzania, he put his thumb up because he had lost his group and really needed somebody to help him. And he put his thumbs up thinking, that's going to help me. Somebody's going to see that and be like, yeah, that person needs help because in America, that's the typical that's the typical symbol for someone needing roadside assistance. Um, However, he noticed very quickly that nobody was stopping for him. In fact, caked over and over in the paprika dust, he was left confused. Eventually, he pantomimed or imitated um, what everyone else seemed to be doing, sort of a palm down, a symbol, and instantly somebody stopped for him. He thought this was really interesting, so he, asked them about it, and they told him that the thumbs up symbol, which is almost universally used as a symbol of, needing help, was actually the equivalent in Tanzania of giving someone the bird. Yet another thing that you'd think of as a universal symbol, this middle finger, basically symbol is almost universally taken as being rude or being, aggressive in that sense. And so no wonder nobody was stopping for him. And he thought this was so interesting that he decided to stop and think a little bit more about culture and how it develops. Um, and so he decided to look at it and break it down into a few things. Um, Primarily two forms. Um, the that although culture uh, was unique to each group, it was widespread, both to small groups and large groups. And these two things is that he found that it's both symbolic and functional. Um, yeah. Um, and so he kind of broke it down into some of these like cultural differences. Then he decided, well, why don't I apply it to apes? You know, because they have all these different distinctions between different groups that he found. And what he found is that it was actually incredibly interesting for two reasons. First of all, he could see these major differences, both symbolically and functionally, in these ape populations. One of them was that um, he found that some groups benefited more from, being more cooperative, and some benefited from being a little more aggressive in their aspects. But as it related to anthropology, he also found that there was a strange dislike of a lot of standard people studying culture for it being applied to apes. He found that it was interesting. Um, and he found that it was a very reductive view that took the culture we live in as humans and disconnected it from apes, disconnected it entirely, um, trying to take those two things apart. But he found that um, by taking a more wide approach, you could apply it to the primates and see that, culture sort of develops alongside life. Some things, for example, primates over in Africa, South African chimpanzee group would actually indicate wanting a partner in two ways. One of which was symbolic. They would take leaves and groom them very delicately, and another was that they would chew leaves to show that they were in the mood for mating. Both of which signaled a similar thing, even though one is a little more direct and one is a little more developed culturally. Um, he also found that there were many others. For example, bonobos in um, in Africa as well had two entirely different hunter-based cultures. One was um, where they would, when hunting together, they would actually share the kill among the group, sort of rewarding a cooperative lifestyle. The other was that in if they were hunting, a little more separately in by an individual basis, they would actually nepotistically divide up the kill or the food that they had, giving one to one group and one to another. And you notice that this then applied conversely right on back to human culture. For example, the hitchhiking in Tanzania, this for some reason, even though we didn't know why, because of cultural differences translating over generations, the thumbs up symbol, which in America is, help me, was taken as a symbol of offense. And then there were others that were more, functional. For example, in in sort of different Western culture, wedding dresses are white as a symbol of purity because it was often hard to keep them clean and beautiful um, and white. Whereas in India, they were kept red. And that was yet another distinction between cultural differences. Yet at the same time, he noticed that functionally, um, in like African tribes in the Sahara, that they would build thatched roofs, something that would keep them protected from the sun, but would allow the air to blow through to cool them off, sort of form of basic insulation. Whereas in Canada, that really wouldn't work, and so a lot of houses in Canada are built very densely, very to prevent wind and other air movement, which would cool you down. But likewise, he noticed that harpoons, the kind used for catching seals, wouldn't be useful in a Sahara tribe where there were no seals to be had. And so it was both functional and symbolic, this cultural development. Um, he basically, in the essay, he argued that culture is part of our biology. It's the what we do to the why. Why is important, but what we do is also incredibly important. Um, and he explained that by understanding the what we do, we can then understand the why, which can then allow us to change what we do, like are then avoid the negative effects upon humanity. So we have three primary questions in the essay. Um, Craig, so these three questions we would hope you would answer with the uh, in the discussion following, which is in the essay Got Culture, Craig Stanford argues that culture is a vital aspect of human biology. What evidence does he provide to support this claim, and how does it differ from traditional views of culture? What kind of things might that be? Um, how does it connect? Could it be something like I said, or is it something different? Is it a form of um, development, or is it something that's sort of concrete? Guess that's up to you to decide. Another question is why Craig Stansford suggests that culture plays a critical role in shaping our behavior and influencing our survival. How does he explain this process, and what are some examples he provides to illustrate it? Um, I'll let you look at these questions and decide what to do with them. The next article is about Lucy's baby. This article suggests that talks about how um, the study of fossils about of previous humans provides us information on how human biology, human anatomy has developed, not just culture. Um, it basically talks about how why humans have the traits and aspects we have and why those are important. Um, so the main subject of the article is about how the author describes discovering a hominin species, a skeleton of an infant from 3.3 million years ago, and some of the interesting things. Um, it was particularly of value because of its completeness. um, because they could see the difference between in different portions of the skeleton. One of the things is that its brain was only one third of the size of an adult brain. So what that means is that it it was and it still had a lot more development space, whereas a a uh, a chimpanzee uh, uh, a baby or infant of the same age had developed almost 90% of the brain matter that it would have in its adult form. So this indicated that it had a lot more room for neural development and mental growth. It also had had the precursors or important aspects required for bipedalism. So it had joints and hip structures that would allow it to support its weight by standing up, which is really cool when you consider this is 3.3 million years ago, that this is a long time ago. Um, and the author kind of supports this by talking about how, um, interestingly, even though it had a lot of developments for bipedalism, it still retained a lot of aspects of, um, tree climbing and arboreal movement. So it had, like it had primarily its upper limbs were primarily adapted for moving around in treetops. Um, However, its lower half was more adapted to bipedalism. And they noticed this strange, distinction, even though some of the aspects of its lower half were maintained, such as it had a long big toe, which would have been more useful for grasping onto branches, i.e., arboreal movement. Um, this also showed basically that in the time, the article talked about how in the time there were it was a transitional period between, the grasslands of Africa we know now, and at the time being a more wet environment, which encouraged rainforest growth. So it was that the environmental pressure was had reason to keep arboreal movement, but it was developing bipedalism as a survival mechanism, which allowed it to grow and develop, both independently as a mosaic, as it explains in the article. Um, so then the discussion, the questions are about Lucy's baby. How does the discovery of the infant skeleton, known as Lucy's baby, contribute to our understanding of human evolution and the development of bipedalism? Which, I mean, maybe some ideas. Um, and in what ways does the study of Lucy's baby differ from previous studies of early human fossils, and what new information does it provide? And how does the discovery of Lucy's baby help to fill in the gap in the fossil record of her early human development? And what implications does this have for our understanding of human evolution? And here's the articles. All right, that's our presentation for week 3 articles. If you have any questions, that'd be the discussion would be a perfect place to place them. We'll be happy to answer any questions or talk and discuss and sort of help you understand maybe some aspects that weren't explained ex terribly well. Um, so yeah, see you all in week 3.